Welcome to KetoMealsAndRecipes.com. To continue with simple meal recipes, especially those that use simple pantry stable ingredients and easily available other grocery ingredients, today I will be showing you how to make my stuffed bell pepper soup, also known as capsicum soup. As always, this keto recipe is going to be sugar-free, grain-free, and as a result, gluten-free. If you're wondering about the taste of this soup, let me describe it to you. To me, it tastes like a cross between a Hungarian paprikash recipe and my Croatian stuffed bell peppers, which are made in a spicy tomato sauce. And the soup has a similar texture to chili con carne. Please watch the entire video and I will show you how to make this keto stuffed bell pepper soup while sharing cooking tips and prep and storage ideas. By the way, the macronutrient ratio for the stuffed bell pepper soup is 2:1 with 5.8 grams of total carbs, 1.9 gram of soluble fiber, 0.2 grams of insoluble fiber, resulting in 3.6 grams of net carbs per approximately 300 gram of this delicious and very economical one-pot meal. After assembling all of your ingredients, as I'm showing here, the first thing I do is to cut my green bell peppers, aka capsicums, into fork-size even pieces. Once you've cut up your bell pepper or capsicum, set it aside for a moment. I'd like to mention that although you can use any color of bell pepper, for the best and most authentic taste, I would highly recommend that you use the green bell peppers. They are not as sweet as the yellow, orange, or red ones, but they do have a stronger taste that is a nicer complement and results in an added layer of flavor for the soup. The next thing I do is cut up my onion. And as you can see, I have a particular technique that I like to use so that I can get even small cubes. By the way, if you like this recipe, please check out the end cards, which I always choose specifically to go with this meal or complement this meal. This bears repeating. It's a very simple recipe to make and extremely budget friendly. The next few steps I'm going to show on the stovetop in my Dutch oven. I'm doing this because it's easier to demonstrate, but you can do this directly in your slow cooker if it has that setting. Now let's get started. You can either use a large skillet, deep-sided frying pan, or a Dutch oven as I am. Place it on your stovetop over medium or medium-low heat. Add in the oil and heat it, and when you think your oil is hot enough and begins to sizzle, you can toss in the onions. But if you're not sure if your oil is hot enough, here's a quick little tip I'd like to share. Put in one tiny piece of onion and see if the oil around the onion is beginning to sizzle. If it is, your oil is hot enough, and if it isn't, just heat up the oil for a little bit longer. Then cook your onions until they're translucent, and don't forget to toss them every once in a while. When your onions are translucent, use a slotted spoon to remove the onions from the pot and set them aside in a dish. But make sure that you leave the remaining oil in the pot. The next thing I do is I distribute the lean ground beef in the pot. Cook the meat until it's brown at the bottom, and then toss the meat every once in a while as it's cooking. You want your meat to be completely browned and cooked all the way through. Since it will take a few minutes, and while your meat is browning, take this time to pour your whole canned tomatoes into a bowl, and using a potato masher, squish and grind the tomatoes into very small pieces. But don't put it into a blender or food processor and puree. You want small pieces of tomato to still be visible. Here's a food quality tip. When you're buying canned tomatoes, always buy the whole canned tomatoes, not the crushed or chunked canned tomatoes. That's because in the preparation, the best quality tomatoes are always put into the can with the whole pieces, and then the lesser qualities go into the cut pieces, and the poorest quality and remaining tomatoes are used to make the crushed or pureed can of tomatoes. I don't always mention this, but I like to look for the San Marzano tomatoes, which are grown in Italy, because these San Marzano tomatoes are nutrient dense since they're grown in rich volcanic soil. But, as always, check the label and make sure that they're authentic. The San Marzano tomatoes have a special logo on the can, authenticating that they're from the region. Okay, now the meat is browned and it's time to season the meat. First, sprinkle the black pepper over the entire surface, the thyme, the smoked paprika, salt, and sage. Also add the tomato paste and the dried parsley flakes. Then toss everything to combine and cook for about 5 minutes. This will allow for the seasoning and tomato paste to flavor the meat. You can cook the soup on the stove top, but in this demonstration I will show you how I do it in the slow cooker. I will address the stovetop method later on. When my meat is nicely browned and when everything has simmered together for 5 minutes, I next transfer the seasoned meat to the slow cooker and set that aside for a moment. And in the meanwhile, then using the same pan as I did to brown everything, I next cooked the green bell pepper, capsicum in the same pot that I browned the meat. You don't have to cook the green bell pepper for very long, just 1 minute, long enough for the bell pepper to soften and for some of the natural bell pepper sweetness to come out. Now it's time to sprinkle the grated garlic on top of the bell pepper. Stir these two together and cook for 1 more minute. Then again, using your slotted spoon or spatula, transfer these ingredients to the slow cooker. However, you can cook this soup on the stove top rather than using a slow cooker. So instead of putting everything into your slow cooker, put it into your soup pot. It doesn't matter which method you use. The only difference will be how long you cook it for. Now, to get the best flavor, I'm going to pour the chicken stock, beef broth, or bone broth, whatever you're using, into the pot that you browned the meat and cooked the vegetables in and created that wonderful fond. By adding your stock to this, you'll be able to gently loosen the fond and incorporate it into the stock. When you notice that most of the fond has come off the bottom of the pot, stir well and then pour into your slow cooker or soup pot. And regardless of which method you're using to cook and finish the soup, after you've poured the stock over the meat, add the prepared onions. Also pour the crushed tomatoes you prepared and stir everything well to combine. Just adding these ingredients together, this soup already smells really good, even though it hasn't had time to cook yet. So now for the cooking instructions. If you're cooking using the stovetop method, just cover your soup pot with a tight lid. Cook over medium heat until you notice that the liquid in the pot is beginning to boil lightly. Then reduce the heat to medium-low, but high enough to maintain a continuous simmer, and cook for about 2 hours. This longer cooking time is required in order to develop the great taste. Otherwise, you'll have something that is very ground beef tasting and kind of bland. Now, if you're cooking this using the slow cooker method and you've transferred everything as explained into your slow cooker pot, cover your slow cooker with a lid and set the timer either on high for 4 hours or set to low for about 8 hours. You can also do this in your pressure cooker, but you'll have to adjust the timing accordingly. Now there's one last step you have to do, and you do this shortly before the soup is done. The last step is to grate or rice your cauliflower and set about 1 cup of the cauli rice aside. And then, in the last few minutes of cooking, toss the cauli rice directly into your pot or slow cooker and cook for 5 minutes. You don't need to cook any longer than that. After 5 minutes, the cauli rice will be done, but still have a bit of a texture. Here's an optional step, which I like to do, but you don't have to do this. Just before adding your cauli rice, you may notice that the soup is still quite liquidy and kind of thin. If you like it that way, add the cauli rice and serve it like that. However, if you prefer, as I do, a thicker, more stew-like broth, after adding the cauli rice, I immediately sprinkle about 1/2 teaspoon of glucomannan over the meat and stir well to combine, and then cook for 5 minutes. And then, in the next several minutes, as the soup rests, you will notice that it thickens as it cools slightly, while maintaining a really nice texture. I like my soup a little bit thicker in this way because it has a silkier consistency. But as I said, this step is totally up to you. You decide how thick or thin you like your soup. And to finish this meal off, here's how I would serve it. After scooping out or ladling my soup into my serving bowl, I like to sprinkle some shaved Parmesan on top of the soup. The shaved Parmesan not only makes this look a little bit fancier, but it actually tastes really good with the soup. Since this is a one-pot meal, I also like to serve my stuffed bell pepper or capsicum soup with my grain-free pita made 2 different ways, which I make using the stovetop method and browning with butter. Or you could serve it with my nacho chips, like you would for a tortilla soup. Please check out the links for these 2 suggestions in the description below. As you can see, this is a very simple but filling meal, and all of the leftovers will keep in your refrigerator for 4 to 5 days. Or you can portion off the remainder into mason jars that are the appropriate size for you or your family. But don't forget to date and label the mason jar top, and then place in the freezer. This will keep for several months in your freezer and will be ready for you to enjoy when you want a quick and easy prep-ahead meal. I hope that this budget-friendly, year-round comfort meal will be one you and your family will enjoy again and again. To everyone, thank you very much for watching my video, especially if you survived all the way to the end. And for all the ingredients and written directions, please check out the link for the written printable recipe in the description below. Lastly, if you like my work, please subscribe, turn on your notification bell, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, and do share the link to my channel with someone that you know. And everyone, have a wonderful rest of your day. And I hope to see you next time.